Good morning, everyone. I'm Geoff Grubner, obviously joining you via pre-recorded video message this morning and not in person. I'm deeply saddened to not be there with you. For those of you who I know and who I've worked with in the past, I'm really sorry I can't be there to catch up over a cup of coffee and a biscuit later on today. For those of you I've not met before, I'm equally sad that I can't be there to meet some new people and learn from your experiences and what you're doing in your organisations at the moment. Clearly, COVID impacts us in many ways, and unfortunately, I'm stuck in Melbourne at the moment, and I just can't travel to New South Wales. So, hence, the organisers have asked that I prepare something as a video call or a video recording to send through to you. I hope you find this engaging and interesting as we work through the next half hour or so. So as mentioned, Geoff Grubner from GBS and BP. I've been in BP for about 20 years now. I started off my career in BP a long time ago in New Zealand in HR, but moved to Australia in 2000. And since then, held a number of roles across a number of different divisions of BP. I've spent time in sales and marketing. I've spent time in B2B sales and customer and retail. I've spent time in M&A parts of BP looking at other acquisitions and disposals that we've made. I've also spent time running a large part of BP's operations in Australia and also their logistics organisations as well. So a long, broad commercial background in BP, which I believe set me up really well to move into the GBS organisation about 5 years ago and to head up what I think is one of the best parts of our organisation here in Australia. So GBS ANZ is a team of around about 300 people. We offer services across procurement, finance, customer and HR services, and we also have a small distribution and technology team here as well. My accountability also goes outside of the ANZ region. I look after the GBS office we have in Shanghai, which we only formed about 6 months ago. And I'm also on the team that is setting up BP's new office in Pune in India as well. So I hope that you enjoy this session. I know that it was meant to be a two-way Q&A type of presentation. Obviously now more me talking, but I know that the organisers, if they haven't talked to you already, will talk to you about a process by which you can submit questions, and I'll respond to those via email in due course. So I hope that we get to the heart of some of the interesting things you have. I've thought deeply about where to take the conversation, and I've tried to put myself in your shoes as to what you'd be interested in. So I hope that you find this session engaging and hopefully answering some of the questions that you may have in your head. So I've been asked to talk today about the decision that BP has made to not renew its BPO contract with Accenture. And it'd be quite simple for me to start right there and talk you through the how and the why of that. But I think that to really answer this question with a bit more context and granularity, I think I need to focus on probably 4 areas. The first is to talk about BP's strategy and what we are trying to achieve inside our organisation. That then really plays out to the GBS strategy and how we are realigning ourselves and our purpose to match up with what we're trying to do across the broader BP, which feeds into itself, well, the decision we've made to not renew contracts with Accenture. And then I would wrap it up with, well, where to today in a COVID world, and where do we think we're going to take our organisation in GBS beyond the Accenture relationships. So let's start off with BP strategy. BP is a long-term, over 100 years old in ANZ, a long-term oil and gas company, and we've recently announced our ambition to be a net zero carbon producer by 2050, which, as you can imagine, is challenging for any organisation, let alone an organisation that is predominantly an oil and gas organisation. That ambition causes us to think quite differently inside our business and to move our thoughts away from oil and gas into low carbon energy, whether that be wind or solar or hydrogen. It actually causes us to reframe our organisation in a number of ways, not only how we engage with our consumers, society in general, how transparent we are, but it also fundamentally changes the financial frame of BP. I won't go into all the returns on different asset classes, but I think it's quite common knowledge that low carbon energy is actually quite a easy asset class to access, and therefore much lower risks than traditional hydrocarbons, and as such, as you would expect, lower returns from such an asset class, which has really driven that strategy of BP's to move away from oil and gas into low carbon, and the resulting change to the financial frame of BP is really causing finance and more detailed analysis in GBS about, well, what's our strategy to support BP's low carbon ambitions, and to really look at the financial frame of BP as we try and take out costs and realign ourselves to our new global aspirations of a net zero organisation. So drilling down a bit then into, well, what is the strategy of GBS in BP? And there's really two major driving elements that sit behind this strategy. The first is that we must materially reduce the costs of operating GBS inside BP. GBS is a big organisation. We employ about 5,000 people. We currently have Accenture, who employs over 1,500 people for us. So it is a big organisation, and it is a big contributor to the costs of finance and indeed to the costs of operating BP. So we must materially look at the GBS organisation and how we can reduce those costs significantly in quite a short time frame. The second component of the GBS strategy is, how do we create more value for BP? And by more value, how do we bring more activity into GBS? How do we drive efficiencies in that in that activity that we bring in? And how do we really extend the reach of GBS to drive more opportunities and more cost savings for BP? So it's quite a challenging strategy to materially reduce your costs. And I won't go into what percentage that is, because that is probably trade secrets, but it's a big number. And we've realized that to do that, we have to significantly change the way we work inside our organization. We have to digitize, we have to automate, and we have to drive straight through processing across the activity sets that we own. Now, we've been trying to do this inside BP for a long time, and arguably we are more advanced than many organisations in this place. And I know from my history, I was one of the first people inside BP to introduce RPA 4 years ago. I was one of the first people to do some serious deep work inside SAP to drive straight through processing. But really, that's just superficial compared with what we are doing now inside our organisation. And to do that, we have to think about the structure of our organisation, the activity sets that we own inside GBS, and we have to think about the end-to-end process and how we can really take that and materially change the way it operates and the costs associated with operating each process. And the way that we're thinking about this inside our organisation, and I know that talking to some of my peers over the last months on this topic, it's caused some interesting conversations, is that we've made a very deliberate decision to separate operations from transformation. And I know a lot of you would use the language of global process owners as a sort of a intermediate between that transformative capability and that operational capability. And just to give you an idea of what we're doing inside BP is we don't actually use that role anymore, but the broad accountability set that a global process owner had now sits inside our transformation organisation, which means that our operations teams are focused on efficient operations, on delivering their KPIs. They're obviously still focused on improvements where they can. They still undertake things like CI. They still bring in agile methodologies to how they run their small projects. But the big drivers of change sit now in what we call our transformation organisation. our digital transformation and services organisation. In that organisation, we've formed a number of capability sets. The first is data. So we own all data inside our transformation organisation. They own the accountability of managing and maintaining that data. They own the accountability of analysing and understanding that data to determine what opportunities we might have to create the radical efficiencies that we're looking for. So for example, tools like Cryon or tools like Celonis all sit inside our digital transformation organisation, and that's the analytics that we do inside that team to understand where our opportunities are. So there's a data component, there's an analytics component, there's also a heavy RPA and automation component in that team, and there's a project management organisation in that team which incorporates change and the like. One of the things we've not done in BP is that we've not brought the IT organisation into GBS. So, but what we have been very clear on is what is it that IT do and what is it that we do inside an organisation like GBS. And the way to think about the delineation that we've forced into BP is that our IT organisations own our core ERPs and our core applications and our core platforms, and they ensure those applications and platforms run appropriately. They are across our digital security and the reliability of our services. But the optimization of our services through those platforms is owned in GBS. So that's quite a different plan and different structure to a number of organisations I know. But the decision that we've made to drive transformation in a dedicated transformation organisation and to hold operations in an operations organisation has been a really, really critical one for us. And that's what's enabled us to think quite differently about the opportunities we have to create the radical optimization that we are looking for. And good examples of that are really forming a one procurement system inside BP. BP is a big organisation. We have 70,000 people, over 70 countries in multiple functions. It's big and it's complex. And we've been trying to streamline procurement for years, yet we still have over a dozen different procurement platforms. But now by owning the data around procurement in the GBS Digital Transformation Organisation, the analysis that we've completed across all those platforms, we see the massive opportunity that we have to drive standardisation across one or two platforms only, and to deliver that project inside a GBS organisation. So that's really at the heart of what we've been trying to do to drive our own optimisation inside GBS. So if you can recall back to the strategy of GBS, two things: our own optimisation and performance, and then creating more value for BP. So now that we're creating this organisation that has this great transformational capability, what we're seeing is that there's an increased willingness to actually move more work out of embedded teams into GBS, because we have that transformational capability and muscle and that proven track record of delivery. So what does this mean for Accenture? And how does this strategy that we've adopted actually impact Accenture? Well, a couple of things to say on this. Firstly is that we've thought very carefully about BP as a globe and where do we want to support our internal customers and external customers from a location strategy point of view. And our concept is around large hubs, and those hubs are based in Europe, in Hungary and in India, and then a series of what we call connected cities that provide local bespoke services to the different parts of BP around the world. So for example, the team I operate in China, they provide quite bespoke services in Mandarin to the Chinese organisations. The team in ANZ are transforming to being an external customer-facing organisation here and a finance organisation that provides meaningful analytics and analysis to the performance units in Australia. And likewise across the centres we have in Mexico and Poland and Cape Town and the like. So 2 big hubs where we hub all of our heavy services, where we standardise our global activities, and where we host our big transformational teams. And then a whole lot of connected cities around the globe where we have more bespoke, more local systems and support for the local organisations. Secondly is that, well, we've made this decision, we want to transform rapidly. And what does that mean for Accenture? So before I talk more about Accenture, I just want to pause, because BP has had a very long relationship with Accenture. I know the notes say 10 years. The actual length of the relationship with Accenture is over 30. BP first outsourced back office processing to Accenture from our Alaskan business in the late 80s. We're one of the first organisations in the globe to actually have a BPO contract, and indeed with Accenture. And that relationship has lasted until now, so over 30 years. And you don't have a commercial 30-year relationship without both being successful. And our organisations have grown together. The services that Accenture provide for BP have grown over the years, and to a point late last year where Accenture employed over 2,000 people on the BP account. And Accenture has been brilliant for BP. We certainly wouldn't have the platform that we have right now to launch our new strategy if it wasn't what for Accenture's done. And I can recall, even in my short time, there are many, many times when the Accenture teams have gone well over and above their contractual obligations to support BP and to help us through different challenges. So I'm not sitting here talking to you today about we are not renewing our contract with Accenture for any bad reasons, but more about, to enable our strategy, we needed to do something quite different. And that difference was we needed to have ownership of the whole end-to-end environment to enable ourselves to radically change. So when I think about Accenture and what they were doing, is they were providing really smart people, really diligent people, driving processes through the systems and platforms within the policies and the procedures that we document and develop for them. And they were great at that. What Accenture didn't own was they didn't necessarily own the procedures, although they worked really proactively with us to develop those. They certainly didn't own BP policy, as you would expect. And they definitely didn't own BP infrastructure, our architecture or environments. And they definitely didn't own the interaction with our external BP customers. So when you think about what we are trying to do inside our organisation, we needed to have our hands around all of those parts of the puzzle to drive the radical transformation and change that we are looking to deliver through our new strategy. And it was just apparent to us that Accenture couldn't do that because they didn't own the whole piece. We weren't obviously prepared to give the whole piece to Accenture, and I think that would be common to most people. But we had to really think that if we're going to change ERPs, core systems, we need to change policies, change how we work with our customers inside BP, we need to change how we go to the marketplace, how we interact with external customers. We need to own that inside BP. And we made the decision that we will bring that activity that Accenture have back into BP to give us the whole end-to-end and enable us to think about all of the elements that we need to actually look at and change to radically change the model and radically reduce the costs out of BP. So I hope that gives you some sort of insight. Nothing to do with Accenture's poor performance at all, and I want to make that really clear. They were great, and I think depending on where you are in your journey, I would still recommend to any number of companies that they still go down the outsourcing model with companies like Accenture. Nothing to do with their past performance, but more about we didn't see them being able to contribute to our strategy moving forward. And that's the reason why BP has made a decision to not renew its relationship. And indeed, we made an even deeper decision to build our new office in India in Pune, not in Bangalore, where all of the current Accenture workers are for BP. And we did that because we want a new mindset. We want to change the way we approach work. We need a different way of thinking. And we didn't necessarily want to bring on those people who've been working on the BP contract for a number of years. hence we moved our office to Pune. You'll note another thing from me, I've not used the word until right now, captive, because we don't see GBS as a series of captive locations. GBS is part of BP. We are a support organisation, and we drive value for the organisation through what we do and how we transform. And we just don't use that captive work language anymore. We don't use service organisation, we don't use shared service organisation, because GBS is really part of the strategy that will modernise finance and ultimately contribute to the delivery of BP's aspirations and goals to be a net zero organisation. So I've given you the background about the strategy of BP. I've narrowed that down to what we're trying to do inside GBS about radically reducing our services and creating more value. I've then talked about that in relation to the impact that our strategy has on the Accenture contract and how we've chosen to not renew that. So maybe for the last few minutes, it's a good idea to talk about, well, where do we go now inside GBS? Where do we take our organisation? How do we continue to evolve that in a post-COVID world? So firstly, we're still in the process of moving activity in from Accenture. We're most of the way through that now. We'll have completed the majority of that work by August this year. We have also made decisions to move activities into our new office in Pune from around the globe, both from Australia, from our Americas offices in Chicago, from our Kuala Lumpur offices, and from our Hungary offices and our Houston offices. So we've really been streamlining and getting crystal clear about our location strategy, where we hold our hubs, and what our connected cities do. So we've really been consistent about getting all that activity in one place, closing out the Accenture work, and really setting ourselves up with this amazing operating organisation inside GBS and this amazingly capable transformation organisation inside GBS as well. When I look to the future, I only see those two parts of GBS growing and creating more value, but I also see us continuing to bring more work into GBS, from the broader parts of BP. We've worked tremendously hard to attract fantastic talent into our transformation organisation, and we're almost predominantly now building out that organisation in India. Previously, we had transformational capability around the world, and we still do hold small teams globally, but we've been super impressed with the capability that we've found in India, particularly in Pune, one of the reasons for going there. And we've been amazed by the level of skills, digital skills, data skills, analytic skills, agile skills that we've been able to attract into BP in Pune and in India. Equally, we've been impressed by the level of change management capability as well. We find now that if you go after the right cohort of people, they're all experienced across the globe, they've run big programs and big projects, and they're quite used to actually rolling out big change in global organisations. So the future for the GBS organisation is really to double down on what our current bets are. Our investment is in India and in Hungary. Our investment is in deep technical capabilities that will enable us to transform our organisations moving forward. Our investment is also in a mindset in India and Hungary that is all around digital transformation, around technology, around self-development, and around how we engage right across the world from our India workforce. So I think the future of GBS is bright, a really strong part of BP moving forward. So to recap on all that, I think I've touched on where we start off as a strategy of BP, how we're moving inside GBS to drive huge value, and that we're doing that through transformational effort and operational effort. And that as a result of that desire and a result of having to own the whole ecosystem to drive transformation, that we've had to retire the Accenture contract. And to reinforce, Accenture is a great organisation and I really respect them, and I'll miss some of the friendships that I've had with those people. And then lastly, that we're really forming up an organisation inside GBS with very, very strong digital skills, very, very strong data and analytics skills and agile skills, but most importantly, very strong partnering and change management capabilities as we see those hubs in Hungary and India really continuing to drive the value not only for GBS, but a much broader value for BP as we bring more work into it. So I hope you enjoyed that. I hope that you found that informative. I know that if I was you, I would have 1,000 questions. And as I said at the start, I really do apologise that I couldn't be with you to actually answer those questions in person. But I think that the organisers will talk to you, if they haven't already, about a process to submit your questions. And I'll be more than happy to reply to those on email as they come through. Thank you for your time. As I said, I really wish I could be there for the next few days to learn more, to meet you, to socialise and to renew old friendships and grow new friendships. I'm very sorry I can't, but I do wish you a great conference. I hope that you enjoy the next few days. I hope you learn, and of course, if you'd like to contact me, please do through the channels that the organisers make available to you. Thank you very much and enjoy your next few days.